Crown Prince Abdullah greets the Shah as he lands at Baghdad airport after a 7-hour flight from Rome.
In 1953, President Eisenhower had sent a top CIA agent to Tehran to finance a military coup in favor of the Shah, whose power had been pushed aside by the popular Prime Minister Mossadegh. At first, the coup failed, and the Shah fled amid scenes of wild disorder. But soon afterwards, he returned with the help of the army, backed by the United States. From then on, the Shah ceased to be a constitutional monarch and enjoyed absolute power. 10 years later, the Shah distributed title deeds to landless peasants. He was encouraged in an ambitious program of land reform by President Kennedy, who feared that the Russians would exploit the feudal backwardness of Iranian society. Not all peasants gained land from the Shah's reforms. Many more were driven off their fields. Millions flocked to the city. By 1976, nearly half the population lived in urban areas, 4.5 million of them in the capital, Tehran. But this drift to the cities was unplanned. Iran became a nation of uprooted and bewildered country people, struggling to survive in chaotic urban slums.
شاهنشاها کشور شاهنشاهی ایران به مردم این سرزمین باستانی.
He lived in a world apart from his people. He was kept in power by a vicious security service and the 5th largest army on earth, equipped with American weaponry. He ignored calls for democracy. He let the nation's vast oil wealth go only to the few.
The Shah used highly repressive methods to impose even his more liberal policies and to keep himself in power. After 1963, all opposition was banned. Torture and maltreatment of prisoners became current practice. International press reports in the 70s began to damage the Shah's standing in the West. In 1977, when Jimmy Carter came to power with his emphasis on worldwide human rights, the Shah felt obliged to permit a limited measure of free speech in Iran. The opposition was able to address this open letter to the imperial palace, protesting at the Shah's policies. By the autumn, with Carter's encouragement, Tehran's universities had once again become centers of free discussion, and even political meetings, where previously banned literature was openly distributed. This meeting was organized by the Marxist-Leninist guerrilla group, the Fedayeen. The government became seriously alarmed. On a visit to Iran, an uneasy President Carter was persuaded to endorse the Shah's policies in a public speech.
Iran, because of the great leadership of the Shah, is an island of stability in one of the more troubled areas of the world. This is a great tribute to you, Your Majesty, and to your leadership, and to the respect and the admiration and love which your people give to you.
In Tabriz, after angry police officers shot dead a teenage student, the people attacked police stations, banks, hotels and cinemas. Troops were sent in to suppress the uprising. Nearly 100 people were killed. These new martyrs had in their turn to be commemorated on the 40th day following their deaths. The government started a counter-offensive against the street protests, using armed troops against unarmed demonstrators. Tehran, 1978. Unarmed demonstrators confront the firepower of the Shah's armed forces. These scenes were filmed by an Iranian cameraman, Ehsan Adi. For 4.5 years, during the build-up to the revolution and throughout its aftermath, he recorded what was happening on the streets of Tehran. The film, smuggled out of Iran, enables us to tell as never before the tragic and bloody history of the Iranian Revolution.
America was caught off guard. For 30 years, the Shah had stood shoulder to shoulder with American presidents against the spread of communism and anti-Western movements in the Middle East.
Iran, because of the great leadership of the Shah, is an island of stability in one of the more troubled areas of the world.
Now, just 10 months later, President Carter's words rang hollow.
The question is beginning to arise how long the present government here can last, with almost daily fighting on the streets of Iran.
It was a question the American ambassador and his deputy needed to answer.
We were invited to this party. We both went around quite separately, talking to the various generals and admirals. When I asked General Rehbur how things were going, he said, no problem at all. So I went over to Admiral Habib Balahi, and I asked the same penetrating question, how are things going?
میگفتیم که وضع ما درسته، ارتش سر جاشه، این حالت پیدا نشه که داره رژیم متزلزل میشه کم کم.
Here we were, the country was in turmoil, and there was not one significant mention of political problems, disorder, or anything. I could not sleep that night. In the morning, I hustled over to the embassy. I went in and I said, Mr. Ambassador, this is not going to work. He smiled and he threw to me a pile of a yellow-lined paper with writing on it, and top was thinking the unthinkable.
The ambassador's report to Washington spelled it out. The Shah's regime was in peril. The president called an emergency meeting.
Our presumption was that the United States policies would be better off if the Shah did stay in power.
We were concerned that if Shah falls, the whole thing could become extremely unstable, not just in Iran, but in the region.
Our bosses couldn't cope with the idea of an 80-year-old Ayatollah, which they didn't even know what an Ayatollah was, who lived on garlic and onions and yogurt, directing a revolution that was about to topple America's most important ally.
چه اونها که تمایلات مذهبی داشتن در دین امام خواستهای خودشون برآورده میکردن، اونهایی هم که نه دیدگاه آزادی خواهانه داشتن ولو لایک، گروه های سیاسی زیادی بودن. باز هم در امام به عنوان چهره مبارزه، یک رهبر مبارزه نیرومند که همه مردم تونسته دور خودش بسیج کرده، شخصیتی میدیدن که میتونن در حمایت از او قام بردارن برای آزادی کشورشون.
From Iraq, Imam Khmeni was causing havoc in Iran. The Shah declined Saddam's offer to kill him, but agreed to his being expelled. Khmeni sought refuge in Kuwait.
محصور داشت به واسطه محصور ما نخواستیم اینها در محصور واقع بشن. از این جهت ما هم دایر بودیم.
گفتم آقای خمینی باید برم به اروپا. ما با گذرنامه‌ای که داریم بدون ویزا راحت میتوانیم وارد بشیم. هیچ مشکلی نخواهیم داشت. دوم این که پاریس یک مرکزیت سیاسی جهانی داره که هیچ کشور دیگه، شهر دیگری در اروپا نداره.
But over how to save the Shah, the president's advisors were divided.
Secretary Vance and I both felt that the best chance the Shah had to maintain his position was to go the direction of reform, to have early elections, to take human rights steps that would gain the confidence of his people.
From Iraq, Imam Khomeini was causing havoc in Iran. The Shah declined Saddam's offer to kill him, but agreed to his being expelled. Khomeini sought refuge in Kuwait.
محصور داشت به واسطه محصور ما نخواستیم اینها در محصور واقع بشن. از این جهت ما هم دایر بودیم.
گفتم آقای خمینی باید برم به اروپا. ما با گذرنامه‌هایی که داریم بدون ویزا راحت میتوانیم وارد بشیم. هیچ مشکلی نخواهیم داشت. دوم این که پاریس یک مرکزیت سیاسی جهانی داره که هیچ کشور دیگه، شهر دیگری در اروپا نداره.
Word went out to his followers round the world.
من توی شیکاگو فیزیک میخوندم که دکتر یزدی به من زنگ زد. من 2 بعد از نیمه شب توی هواپیما بودم به طرف پاریس. $8 هم توی جیبم پول بود.
Khomeini was now in easy reach of the world's media. Khomeini's success in stoking the revolution embarrassed the French president, an ally of the Shah.
L'ayatollah Khomeini, il est venu en France dans des conditions régulières et il s'est installé comme non pas un réfugié politique dont il n'avait pas le statut, mais comme un étranger en résidence en France.
President Giscard sent the official responsible for high-profile foreign visitors to issue a warning to the Ayatollah.
Je suis donc arrivé dans ce pavillon de banlieue, dans cette chambre vraiment dénudée. Ça m'avait impressionné. J'ai fait le rapprochement avec la cellule de moine. Il n'y a pas de canapé, il n'y a rien pour s'asseoir. Lui est assis par terre en tailleur, enturbané de noir, naturellement une barbe blanche, des yeux très vifs. Scrutateur. Je lui dis, voilà, ces derniers jours, vous avez prononcé des philippiques enflammés contre le chef de l'État avec lequel nous avons des relations diplomatiques normales. Et donc, il n'est pas raisonnable que sur le territoire français, vous teniez des propos de caractère politique importants.
آقای خمینی جواب داد که من قصد فعالیت سیاسی در خاک فرانسه ندارم.
من خیلی کمتر اوقات اعلیحضرت رو اینقدر عصبانی دیدم. خیلی معذرت میخوام اگر من این کلمه رو بگم، ولی خب اعلیحضرت فرمودن که این مرتیکه آمده به ایران و تمام همه جا رفته، با همه ملاقات کرده، رئیس قره‌باقی هم دیده. حالا قبل از اینکه بره آمده از من میخواد خداحافظی بکنه.
He cautioned me, and only as a Shah could do, and you'd have to know him and see him looking at you through his glasses with his penetrating look, that I should not forget who the King of Kings was.
I saw him only once when he accompanied the American ambassador to come and inquire about the date of my departure and even the hour of my departure. That's all I discussed with General Heiser.
Before his holiday, the Shah appointed a new prime minister, a moderate and former opponent of his regime, Shapur Bakhtiar.
I hope that we can settle all dispute and misunderstanding between the king and the nation. We hope.
Real power was exercised by a network of self-appointed revolutionary committees, including many ex-criminals, loosely controlled by a central comité sitting in the theological school. Without waiting for Bakhtiar to resign, Khomeini, with no authority but his own, appointed Bazargan, a convinced supporter of Islamic government, as provisional prime minister. He also appointed a secret revolutionary council to negotiate with the chiefs of staff for a peaceful transfer of power. Meanwhile, the people, led by various guerrilla movements and helped by mutineers within the armed forces, were busily preparing for an armed insurrection to finish off what was left of the Shah's regime. In Tehran, 200,000 civilians who had done national service and knew how to handle weapons were eager to fight for the revolution. The turning point came when Air Force technicians mutinied and handed out weapons to the people. Once armed, they easily outnumbered the 40,000 Imperial Guards who remained loyal to the Shah. Fighting spread throughout the city and lasted 2 days. Army curfews were ignored. The spell of fear cast by the Shah's armed might had been broken. The army no longer had a monopoly of firepower. Even the Shah's chieftain tanks were ineffective in street fighting, for which they were not designed and for which their crews had little stomach. By the morning of Sunday, the 11th of February, the army was disintegrating. Indeed, many soldiers tore off their ammunition belts and joined the people. The guerrillas and army deserters, helped by thousands of spontaneous volunteers, seized police stations, arms factories, arsenals, barracks, prisons, the military academy, and the deserted army garrison. At 2 p.m., the Chief of Staff announced that the military would take no further part in the political struggle. Bakhtiar, the nominal Prime Minister, went into hiding, while cheering revolutionaries drove through the streets, brandishing their stolen weapons.